We've all done it, laughed at the joke that stung, nodded in agreement when every part of us screamed no, stayed silent to avoid conflict, even as something deep inside us quietly fractured. But what if these aren't just social compromises? What if every time we tolerate a certain kind of behavior, we feed a shadow? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who stared straight into the abyss of the human psyche, believed this shadow, the dark, hidden side of ourselves and others, wasn't just a metaphor, it was real, alive, patient. He warned us not just of the monsters outside us, but of the ones we let in. Through subtle compromise, through silence, through tolerance. Because in Jung's world, evil doesn't arrive as a tyrant. It whispers through the voice of charm, it hides behind politeness, it wears a smile. The most dangerous things, Jung once wrote, are not the explosive outbursts of madness, but the quiet poisons of the soul that go unnoticed for years. We like to think we're too smart to be manipulated, too kind, to be cruel, too aware to be asleep. But what if our suffering isn't accidental? What if it's the price we pay for tolerating the intolerable? This is not a self-help list. This is not pop psychology. This is a map into the unconscious, drawn by a man who believed that the real war is not out there, it's within. Today, we explore 7 behaviors Carl Jung warns us never to accept. 7 shadows that, when tolerated, do not just damage our lives. They deform the soul. They kill the truth. They make monsters out of men. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, Jung once wrote, to avoid facing their own soul, but you're not one of them. You've chosen to look inward, to ask the dangerous questions, to see what others are afraid to see. So let's begin, not with fears, but with clarity. Because the moment you stop tolerating these behaviors is the moment you begin to reclaim your mind. Not all enemies scream, some whisper. They offer you comfort, praise, even love. But beneath the surface, they are architects of confusion. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear. To navigate society, it isn't inherently evil, in fact it helps us function. But what happens when someone weaponizes that mask to control others? The manipulator doesn't attack, they persuade, they don't force, they distort. And the most terrifying part, they often believe their intentions are pure. People wear masks in order to deceive others, Jung wrote, but even more terrifying, they wear them to deceive themselves. You'll know you're dealing with manipulation when reality feels unstable. Like walking through fog, you second-guess your own memory. You start apologizing for things you didn't do. You begin feeling guilty for having boundaries. This is not random, it's emotional warfare. Manipulators thrive on ambiguity. They push you just far enough to make you uncomfortable, but not so far that you can name the offense. They plant seeds of doubt, then water them with just enough kindness to make you question your own instincts. This isn't love. This isn't respect. It's control, dressed as compassion. And when you tolerate it, even once, you begin to betray yourself. Jung warned of psychic possession, the loss of your inner voice to an external force. Manipulation, he believed, is one of the first symptoms. The more you allow someone to twist your thoughts, the less of you remains. Modern psychology calls it gaslighting. Jung called it a soul fracture. He believed that the unconscious, your deeper self, always knows the truth. But when you ignore that truth to preserve harmony, what you're really preserving is bondage. This isn't just about partners or family. It's political, cultural, institutional. Look at the world. Media that gaslights, leaders who confuse and seduce, influencers who hide control behind charm. The mask has become a tool of mass manipulation. And if you don't take it seriously, if you tolerate emotional control because it feels easier than confrontation, you hand over the keys to your mind. Jung's warning is clear. Beware of those who manipulate your feelings to blur your sense of reality. Because when they steal your clarity, they steal your freedom. Disrespect doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through dismissive tones, through jokes made at your expense, through constant interruptions when you speak. And you let it slide again and again until it becomes your new normal. Carl Jung believed that the soul doesn't die all at once. It erodes, slowly, subtly, and one of the most dangerous forces behind that erosion is repeated disrespect that goes unchecked. The human psyche is wired for dignity. Not ego, dignity. The quiet inner sense that your thoughts, boundaries, and presence matter. Every time someone disrespects you and you accept it in silence, that dignity takes a hit. You may call it humility, or patience, or understanding. But if disrespect becomes a pattern, and you keep absorbing it, what you're actually practicing is self-erasure. Jung warned that this kind of tolerance isn't compassion, it's decay. It teaches the unconscious mind that you don't deserve respect, that your words don't carry weight, that your presence is optional. And once that message embeds itself in your psyche, you begin adjusting your behavior. You speak less, you apologize more, you shrink before entering the room. Not because others are powerful, but because you've internalized your own invisibility. It often starts in childhood. A parent who talks over you, a teacher who mocks you, a peer group that belittles you. You learn early that speaking up means conflict, so you stay quiet. But Jung would argue that silence isn't peace. It's a form of repression. And repression always creates shadows, resentment, bitterness, guilt, that build in the unconscious and leak out in destructive ways later. You may explode in anger at someone who didn't deserve it, or fall into depression without knowing why, or numb yourself to avoid the reality you've accepted. The root cause, chronic, tolerated disrespect, and the soul's silent cry, enough. Disrespect is more than rudeness. It's a signal, intentional or not, that your identity doesn't matter, that your time is dispensable, that your boundaries are negotiable, that your truth is inconvenient. And when this behavior becomes consistent, it's no longer about the other person, it's about you. You've become complicit in your own disappearance. Jung believed that every human being has a sacred task, how to become fully themselves. That means guarding your dignity as you would guard your life, because in a sense it is your life. There's a common fear that if you stop tolerating disrespect, you'll end up alone. But Jung would remind you, better solitude than self-betrayal. Respect isn't something you demand with force, it's something you declare by no longer tolerating its absence. Disrespect will cost you relationships, but tolerating it will cost you yourself. You don't need to raise your voice, you don't need to fight, you only need to stop pretending that being disrespected is somehow okay. Because the longer you do, the further you drift from who you truly are. Jung's warning is clear. When someone repeatedly violates your dignity and you keep accepting it, you are not being virtuous, you are being erased. The erosion begins with one boundary left unguarded, but it ends with an identity quietly abandoned. Some people don't argue with you, they don't insult you, they don't disrespect you in obvious ways. But every time you're around them, you leave feeling heavy, drained, numb, as if your life force has been quietly stolen. Carl Jung didn't. He used the term energy vampires, but he understood the concept deeply. He spoke of people who live unconsciously, those who have not integrated their inner shadows. These people don't take responsibility for their emotions, so they project them onto others. And if you're not careful, you become their emotional dumping ground. They don't want resolution. They want your attention, your energy, your reaction, because it keeps them alive. It distracts them from facing themselves. You try to help, you listen, you empathize, but it never ends. There's always a new crisis, a new complaint, a new storm to be centered around them, and slowly, your own clarity fades. Your energy becomes a resource for someone else's chaos. The damage isn't always immediate. It builds quietly, through repeated emotional labor that is never returned, through conversations that always leave you more confused than connected, through obligations you didn't agree to, but somehow feel guilty escaping from. Jung warned that when a person refuses to face their own unconscious wounds, they will unconsciously seek others to carry them. That's what these people do. They don't mean to drain you, but they will if you allow it. And here's the truth most avoid. You are not obligated to heal everyone. You are not responsible for fixing what they refuse to face. There is a difference between compassion and self-sacrifice. Jung believed that real psychological growth begins when you stop being the caretaker for someone else's refusal to grow. Sometimes you hold on because of guilt, because it feels selfish to walk away. But Jung saw this as a misunderstanding of morality. Sacrificing your mental health to keep someone emotionally comfortable isn't kindness, it's spiritual self-harm. You are not abandoning them. You are choosing to protect your energy so you can live with integrity. The person who constantly drains you is not your enemy. But if you tolerate their presence long enough, your soul will begin to dim. You'll feel tired all the time. Lose passion for the things you once loved. Become resentful without knowing why. This is what happens when your energy is chronically siphoned. Jung's solution wasn't cruelty. It was boundaries. Clear, firm, unapologetic limits that separate your soul from the weight of someone else's shadow. Not everyone deserves access to your emotional world. Some people need to be loved from a distance. Some need to be let go entirely, because your energy is sacred. And if you keep tolerating people who take more than they give, you'll have nothing left when your real purpose calls. Jung's warning is simple. If someone drains your spirit every time they appear, that is not a flaw in you, it's a sign. Add a step away. Some people aren't interested in understanding you. They're interested in blaming you for things they refuse to confront in themselves. Carl Jung called this projection a defense mechanism of the unconscious. When someone cannot handle a truth within themselves, they see it in others. Not because it's there, but because it's easier than facing the mirror. You become the villain in a story that has nothing to do with you. You're too cold, too sensitive, too proud, too emotional. Not because it's true, but because those are the battles they're avoiding inside themselves. And the danger comes when you tolerate it. When you start questioning your reality because someone else is uncomfortable. With their own, Jung warned that the unhealed psyche doesn't just lie, it builds a fantasy. A world where their wounds are always caused by others. And if you let that narrative take root, you begin living inside someone else's delusion. You over-apologize. You walk on eggshells. You internalize problems that don't belong to you. Slowly, their chaos becomes your burden. Projection isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet disappointment, passive aggression, the cold withdrawal of warmth when you refuse to play along. It's subtle. And that's why it's dangerous. The projected blame often hides behind guilt trips or self-pity. You become responsible for their moods, their failures, their triggers, and if you're not careful, your identity begins to dissolve under their emotional confusion. Jung believed that the only way to stay sane in a world of projection is to develop brutal self-honesty. You must know who you are, clearly, so you don't become who someone else needs you to be in their inner drama. This is the psychic game. They cast their shadow on you, and they wait to see if you'll wear it. Tolerating projection is spiritual. Erosion. You waste years trying to earn trust, trying to prove your innocence, trying to repair something that was never yours to fix. And still, they'll never be satisfied, because projection isn't about you. It's about what they can't accept within themselves. Jung's advice? Withdraw from the game, stop participating in the fantasy, refuse to absorb guilt that isn't yours. Let people misunderstand you if it protects your peace. You don't need to explain yourself to those committed to misperceiving you. Everyone has a shadow, but not everyone takes responsibility for it, and until they do, they will search for others to carry it for them. Don't be that carrier. You cannot heal the unhealed mind that refuses self-reflection. You can only protect your own. When you tolerate projection, you lose clarity. You start mistaking other people's insecurities for your truth. But when you step back, quietly, firmly, you reclaim your sanity. Jung's warning is timeless. Don't play the role someone else wrote for their inner battle. You're not the villain in their story, and you're not required to be their emotional sponge. You sit in a room full of people, smiling, laughing, talking, but you feel completely alone. Not because you're antisocial, but because there's nothing real being said. Carl Jung called this spiritual suffocation, not the absence of people, but the absence of depth. We tolerate so much noise, endless small talk, mindless opinions, conversations that go nowhere, say nothing, mean nothing. And yet we show up, again and again, pretending we're connected when deep down we're starving for meaning. Jung believed that the soul doesn't thrive on stimulation. It thrives on purpose, insight, and inner truth. When we surround ourselves with environments that only echo surface-level thinking, something in us begins to decay. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you're too serious. Maybe you're too deep. Maybe it's you who's out of place, so you shrink, you adapt, you smile when you're supposed to. But a quiet emptiness starts to grow. The death of meaning isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It happens slowly, by tolerating the hollow, by staying in rooms where nothing real is ever spoken, by keeping company with those who fear silence because it might reveal something true. Jung warned of this psychological death. He believed that when the outer world no longer reflects the inner world, the psyche begins to split. You live one life on the outside, agreeable, social, adaptable, and another on the inside, isolated, restless, lost. This gap creates suffering, a slow kind of soul erosion. You were not made to exist in shallow waters. You were not built for conversations that die the moment they begin. You are not here to trade your inner truth for external approval, but you do, because it's polite, because it's expected, because you don't want to seem strange. So you betray your own mind just to fit into a place you don't even believe. Jung believed this is one of the great tragedies of modern life. We've replaced truth with performance, depth with distraction, connection with convenience, and we wonder why we feel numb, why we scroll endlessly, why we zone out, why nothing feels sacred anymore. It's because we've normalized environments that leave us empty, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Tolerating this isn't harmless. It teaches the unconscious that meaning doesn't matter, that depth is optional, that your hunger for insight is something to be hidden, not honored. But here's the truth. Your longing for meaning is not a flaw. It's your compass. It's your rebellion against the shallow world. If you keep showing up to empty spaces, don't. Be surprised when your soul begins to shrink. Jung's advice is clear. Leave the rooms that drain your spirit. Exit the conversations that insult your intelligence. Walk away from anything that demands your presence but rejects your essence. Because when you tolerate the meaningless, you slowly forget what meaning even feels like. Some people don't want peace. They only feel alive when something is broken, when there's a fire to start, a fight to fuel, a crisis to control. Carl Jung understood this well. He saw that not all chaos is accidental. Some people live in a constant storm because they're terrified of silence, because silence forces them to face themselves. So they manufacture disorder. They create confusion where there was clarity. They stir emotions where calm once existed. And if you tolerate them long enough, you'll find yourself living in a war that was never yours to begin with. They'll tell you it's just passion, that life is dramatic, that this is just how things are. But Jung would have called it what it is. Unconscious self-sabotage projected onto others, and the longer you stay, the more you start mistaking chaos for connection. The ups and downs feel intense, addictive, emotional. But intensity is not intimacy, and crisis is not chemistry. These people pull you into their whirlwind and then blame you when things collapse. They test your limits, violate boundaries, create emotional messes, and expect you to clean them up. Jung believed the truly dangerous people are not the obviously destructive ones. It's the ones who disguise their chaos as love, passion, or spontaneity. They say they need you, but what they really need is someone to absorb the disorder they refuse to face, someone to make their instability feel normal. And if you tolerate it, you lose yourself. You start waking up tired for no reason. You begin doubting your own instincts. You spend your days solving problems that shouldn't even exist. And slowly, your nervous system adjusts to dysfunction. You become numb to the noise. Jung taught that when the unconscious is not made conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. That's what these people bring. Chaos, disguised as fate. They draw you in with intensity, but behind the heat is hollowness. No direction, no responsibility, just drama on repeat. And every time you try to set boundaries, they call you cold, distant, disloyal, because stability threatens them. Stillness forces reflection, and reflection reveals the truth they've spent years avoiding. Here's the reality. Some people don't want healing. They want distraction. And you become the stage for their inner disorder to play out. Jung's warning is simple but powerful. Do not sacrifice your inner peace to stabilize someone else's chaos. It will never be enough. They will always find a new fire to ignite. You are not their emotional firefighter. You are not their therapist. You are not their anchor in a storm they keep creating. You are allowed to walk away, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. Chaos should never feel like home. And the more you tolerate it, the more you betray your need for peace. Jung's truth still stands. What you allow is what will continue. So stop mistaking survival for love, and never tolerate the person who thrives in the very disorder that's killing your spirit. You wake up one day, look in the mirror, and feel like a stranger. The person staring back at you isn't someone you recognize. They don't speak your truth. They don't chase your dreams. They don't carry the fire you once had. And the worst part? You can't even remember when you became them. This is the betrayal of the self, a slow, insidious process that happens when you start tolerating the demands of others over your own inner truth. It's not sudden, it's gradual. But every time you suppress your own needs, desires, and boundaries to accommodate someone else, you chip away at your own identity. Carl Jung understood that the path to individuation, the journey of becoming your true self, requires the courage to say no. To refuse the expectations of others that ask you to shrink, to conform, to disappear into someone else's vision of who you should be. But most of us don't say no. We say yes, over and over again, until we lose ourselves in the process. Start small. A little sacrifice here, a slight compromise there. You say yes to a request even when it feels wrong. You give in to a conversation that drains your energy. You stay quiet when your values are challenged. And one by one, these small betrayals build a life that is not yours. Jung said that the greatest tragedy in life isn't death, but the death of the authentic self. The moment you stop living for yourself and start living for everyone else's approval, you've already begun the process of spiritual decay. Tolerating this kind of behavior, whether it comes from others or even from within, leads to a slow erasure of everything that makes you you, and it's often wrapped in the guise of being a good person. People tell you it's noble to put others first. They say you should be selfless, but selflessness, when pushed too far, isn't virtue. It's self-sabotage. Jung believed that the act of self-neglect is the ultimate betrayal. It's a betrayal of your instincts, your inner wisdom, your desires, your very essence. You allow others to shape your world and define your worth. You lose your voice and with it, your power. But here's the catch. You don't notice it at first. The shift is subtle, until one day you're left wondering why you feel exhausted, empty, and disconnected from everything that once mattered. This erosion of self is what Jung warned against most fiercely, because once you begin betraying your own soul, it's harder to come back from. The path back to yourself is often long and painful, and sometimes it requires a brutal confrontation with the truth of how far you've drifted. And so, you begin to ask yourself, how many times have I said yes when I should have said no? How many compromises have I made in the name of harmony, at the cost of my own peace? How much of my soul have I traded for acceptance, for love, for approval? These are the questions that arise when you face the consequences of tolerating the betrayal of your own self. But it's not too late. You still have the power to reclaim your identity, to take back the parts of you that were once suppressed, to reawaken the passions, the desires, and the dreams that belong to you and no one else. Jung's message is not one of defeat. It's a call to wake up, to recognize the times you've allowed others to take too much, to stand firm in your boundaries, to speak your truth, and to never again allow the slow erosion of your spirit to continue unchecked. The betrayal of the self doesn't have to be permanent, but it does require you to face the uncomfortable truth that reclaiming yourself is a process of cutting away everything that isn't truly yours. And that means learning to say no, loudly, unapologetically, without guilt. Jung's final warning is clear. You are not here to live in the shadow of others' expectations. You are here to live as the full, unapologetic expression of who you truly are. The world we live in is loud, chaotic, overwhelming, filled with the voices of those trying to define who we are, what we should believe, and how we should act. But Carl Jung's teachings remind us that the true revolution, the one that changes everything, begins in silence. It begins the moment you stop tolerating the forces that shape your life without your consent. The moment you refuse to be a passive observer, letting the world dictate your reality. The revolution begins when you reclaim the power to define yourself, to set boundaries, and to stand firm in the truth of who you are. Jung understood that the journey toward individuation, the process of becoming your true self, isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, profound, and internal. It requires courage, self-reflection, and most of all, the willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths that lie within. But this is where your power lies, in the silence that precedes all transformation, in the stillness where your authentic self is born. Now ask yourself, what behaviors will you stop tolerating? What truths will you begin to speak? What parts of your soul will you reclaim today? The revolution may start quietly, but its impact is immense. It's time to stop tolerating the unacceptable and start living the life you were meant to live, on your terms. If you found truth in this message, don't let it end here. Subscribe, share this video with those who need to hear it, and comment below with your thoughts on the behaviors you're no longer willing to tolerate. Together, let's begin this revolution, because the change we seek always starts in silence, and it begins with you.